Hello and welcome to R&B Reviews. I'm Rob.
I'm Brennan.
And today we're going to be reviewing Star Trek. The film is a prequel to the original 1966 TV series and the later films that originally starred William Shatner as Captain Kirk and Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock. These early exploits of Captain Kirk shows him as a young, somewhat rebellious person who is kind of coaxed into joining the Starfleet Academy and learning how to eventually become a crew on the Enterprise. And one of their first missions is taught by Captain Pike, who some Star Trek fans will probably recognize as the original captain from the rejected Star Trek pilot, The Cage. And it turns out that the new crew's mission, featuring many supporting characters, Dr. McCoy, Sulu, and all of them, their first mission as a crew is to seek out a Romulan villain who is destroying several planets. Now, this movie, I walked into the theater and I really enjoyed this movie. I had such great fun with it. So, Brennan, I don't know if you're a big fan of Star Trek or you're an expert on it. I mean, I'm not quite an expert on the show, even though I'm somewhat familiar with it.
Going into this movie, I have never seen a Star Trek movie. This was the first one I saw. I was familiar with the Star Trek universe, from like Simpsons spoofs and stuff like that. And with this being directed by J.J. Abrams, whose previous movie, Mission Impossible 3, I just hated, I was kind of coming in this with mixed expectations, but I didn't want to get my hopes up or my hopes down. I just wanted to take the movie as it is.
Yeah, my dad, I used to watch the old Star Trek show with my dad back in the 80s when I was a kid, and I've seen the movies, like the 6 that was done with the original cast. I really liked this movie. What I felt with this movie was the opposite of what I felt with Wolverine. I felt the adrenaline during the action scenes. I felt the fun, and the actors in this, the acting was also pretty good here. The actors did not try to copy the mannerisms of the original crew members. Like Chris Pine did not copy William Shatner's Kirk. He kind of like made it his own version, but yet you can imagine these being the young Star Trek characters that a lot of us have come to love.
The casting was perfect. There was no weak links and there was no one who's really out of place. Leonard Nimoy is really good in there playing an older Spock. But the casting, they got it all right. The only problem I had with the cast in the movie, or at least with the supporting roles, is I kind of felt the Scotty character comes into the movie a little too late almost for the assembly of the crew. But that didn't bother me so much because Simon Pegg is pretty much good in everything I've seen him in, so I liked him, and they pretty much used him as comic relief, and the humor in this movie is really good from beginning to end, and it really gives this movie a specific charm that Wolverine didn't have. Another thing this movie has over Wolverine was the visual effects in this movie are great. I mean, they are top-notch. They look great. None of it... I never really got taken out of the movie by the effects. I was always in the moment, feeling the adrenaline and the action and all that going on. And I never really got distracted by it. The whole time I was engaged.
Yeah, this movie does have a lot of in-jokes that I'm sure Star Trek fans will catch up. They'll see and they'll recognize right away. But there were a couple things that I was a little bit disappointed in. I thought Eric Bana, who plays the villain, he didn't feel very villainy to me. If there's a reason why he's going around trying to destroy planets and stuff, and I feel like he just didn't bring it in this role.
Yeah, he plays a very familiar villain, just, the guy who's hell-bent on revenge and wants to kill anyone who gets in his way. But Eric Bana did good with what he was given. I mean, it's not really people aren't walking out of the theater going, Eric Bana, he really made that movie. The character Nero kind of gets thrown to the side because your attention in the movie is really on Kirk and Spock's relationship and, sort of the forming of, like, the Enterprise crew from the television show. And, that's really where the focus was, and that's the stuff I really want to watch. I didn't so much want to see the Nero stuff. It just never felt like he had that certain dread and danger to him that a villain should have.
Yeah. I also liked how they managed to fit Christopher Pike, and Christopher Pike was technically the original captain of Star Trek and the rejected pilot, and he's kind of like Kirk's teacher in this movie. And that leads to something that I really wasn't crazy about. There's a scene where Captain Pike's telling Kirk, you can make something of yourself. In that scene, the camera is kind of like shaky, and it kind of distracted me a bit.
that scene didn't bother me so much as I just had a good time watching Kirk being Kirk in the movie. I mean, in the first half, in the first, I want to say quarter of the movie, Kirk is such a great character to watch, and he really gets you into him just with this sort of smart-ass attitude with everything. But the only time the camera movements really bothered me is during some of the earlier action scenes. It was doing the shaky cam thing that's popular now, but I got over it and I got right back into the movie, and it really didn't bother me at all.
Yeah. And there's another element, without giving anything away, somehow time travel is inserted into this movie. Even though it was interesting, I felt like it didn't belong in there. It didn't feel like it's part of the Star Trek mythology, and all that. It felt like it was put in there and it didn't belong in there, and it got confusing.
As soon as that exposition point comes up in the movie, and everyone will know it when it happens, and I definitely don't want to spoil it for anyone like you don't. But yeah, I was sitting there scratching my head for a minute going, wait a minute, what, this movie had so much going for it just now. Why did you throw this in there? But once they get it out, once they get over the hurdle of that's explaining it, you get right back into the movie and you can pretty much enjoy it as you were before.
Yeah, I did have fun with this movie, and I hope a lot of people that go see this movie, whether they're Star Trek fans or they're somewhat familiar with Star Trek or they're not familiar with it, maybe it'll be a good introductory point, like, hey, maybe I'll go to the library or the video store and rent the season box sets of the old show or watch the movies. But one final comment I want to make that really disappointed me the most, the old Star Trek show, each episode kind of was like an allegory for something, like a meaning. Like in some episodes it talked about racism, war, and in the first Star Trek movie, the motion picture, it talked about finding oneself, and in the second film it dealt with age, dying and young. This movie didn't have that, and I wish they could have figured out a way to put in some sort of meaning, to be somewhat consistent with the old Star Trek shows and movies. I would like to have seen that.
I can see where you're coming from, someone who's familiar with the series, but with me, from someone who's not familiar with it at all, this one really felt like as an introductory movie to almost, hopefully more movies of these characters, because I enjoyed this movie a lot, and to get away from the negatives, this movie has so much going for it, and definitely I think they should really continue the series. I mean, J.J. Abrams did exceeded my expectations. I kind of thought this movie might suck, having seen Mission Impossible 3 and the job he did with that. But this movie is just, it's well shot, well acted. I mean, it has everything you want in a good summer movie. And it's really, it's friendly for anyone can walk into this movie and enjoy it.
Yeah. So, how would you rate this movie? Would you say to see it in theaters, rent it on DVD, or to snuff it?
There is no other way to see this movie except for on the big screen with the surround sound and with an audience, so see it.
See it in theaters? Alright, I also say that the audience should see it in theaters, so please, if you've got nothing better to do, please watch Star Trek. I mean, it's like they should have started the blockbuster season with this movie instead of Wolverine.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes, this definitely makes up for the disappointment from Wolverine, though, and this Star Trek sets the bar for the rest of the summer. So we'll see if anything else can top or match Star Trek.
Yeah. All right. So we both say to see Star Trek in theaters. If you want to leave any feedback or comments or what you thought of the movie, we welcome that. And we'll see you on the next edition of R&B Reviews.
Thanks for watching.